The future of Australia's most expensive and expansive security agreement is under a cloud this morning, with the Pentagon undertaking a review of the AUKUS defence agreement between the US, UK and Australia. Under the agreement, Australia would be armed with nuclear-powered submarines at a cost of more than $350 billion.
The US Department of Defence is reviewing the agreement to ensure it is aligned with President Donald Trump's America First agenda. The development is likely to add fresh urgency to an expected meeting between Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump, which might happen on the sidelines of the G7 in Canada this week. This is a developing situation this morning, and we are going to have much more reaction for you. But first, let's take you to our North America correspondent, Carrington Clark, who is in Washington. Carrington, well, ever since AUKUS was first conceived, there have been questions about whether or not the United States would be able to follow through on this in the long term. What do we know is happening this morning?
Yeah, that's exactly right, James. And there were even more questions asked when we saw Donald Trump re-elected to the presidency. This was, after all, a Joe Biden pact. And Donald Trump has never given a full-throated endorsement of AUKUS, although the Defence Secretary here, Pete Hegseth, has said that Donald Trump is supportive of the deal. When Donald Trump had previously been asked about AUKUS, he seemed to be somewhat perhaps confused about the term, or at least didn't hear the question properly. But even when it was repeated to him, he didn't seem to be necessarily going for the full endorsement of the agreement that has been signed. What we know is that the Pentagon is now undertaking a review into this pact. They say it's to make sure that it aligns with Donald Trump's so-called America First agenda. But they say that they'll also specifically be looking at whether or not allies are stepping up fully to do their part for collective defence, and also that the defence industrial base is meeting our needs. There are real questions about whether or not America has the capability to provide Australia with nuclear-powered submarines at the rate that are necessary under the AUKUS agreement, while still allowing them to build enough for their own needs. Now, this has been a question that has been asked by many members of Congress, and although AUKUS does enjoy widespread bipartisan support in the Congress, that is a live question and is something that is concerning to some defence watchers. The question, of course, is whether or not this review will be just about the particular details of the AUKUS agreement, or whether or not it will be more broadly looking at how much, for example, Australia is spending on defence. We already have had calls from America for Australia to spend more on its overall defence capability, and whether or not, of course, the AUKUS agreement itself could be ditched. Australia has already made a substantial down payment for the AUKUS agreement and for the purchase of those initial submarines. But really, this is such a fundamental part of Australia's defence planning for the future that any extra doubt over whether or not America wants to be part of it really goes to the heart of whether or not we're too reliant on American defence support, and will obviously add weight to those sceptics who say Australia needs more autonomy and needs to have a better framework in place to ensure that we're not solely reliant on America's goodwill and agreement.
Yeah, there's going to be an enormous amount of reaction to this today. Carrington Clark there in Washington. Thank you.
Let's go to Canberra now, because there are fresh doubts about whether that meeting between Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump will take place in Canada. Political reporter Tom Lowry joins me now. Tom, that meeting would have provided a chance to raise, of course, this AUKUS review.
Yeah, good morning, Bridget. You'd think this AUKUS review would be top of the agenda at that meeting. There are other things to discuss as well, including steel and aluminium tariffs too. This would have been the first sit-down meeting between Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump. The pair have never met in person. They have, of course, spoken on the phone. This meeting is still expected to take place, but there are some doubts emerging due to a couple of really significant issues. One is yesterday, Australia joining with countries like the UK, New Zealand, Canada and Norway to place sanctions on 2 top Israeli officials, 2 cabinet members in the Netanyahu government. That prompted a very strong response from the US. They condemned those sanctions. The other is the issue of defence spending that Carrington alluded to. The US has asked Australia to lift its defence spending to 3.5% of GDP. It's currently at 2.3%. That request was broadly rebuffed by the Albanese government. The Prime Minister saying Australia will determine its own defence spending levels based upon need, based upon what needs to be spent. So that meeting's still anticipated to take place on the sidelines of the G7 meeting in Canada next week, but it's certainly not locked in, and there are a few doubts emerging as to whether it will go ahead. It's likely to be confirmed late if it does happen. One other quick thing to mention, we haven't heard a response yet from the Albanese government to this AUKUS review, but a former ambassador to the US, Joe Hockey, has spoken saying he believes there is still strong support for AUKUS in the White House and in Congress.